Welcome back to Second Breakfast and the world of Westeros. I'm very excited today. We're moving on to the next chapter of A Game of Thrones, and today we get to talk about a new POV character.
It's very exciting to get to do that so far into the book. I'm really excited. I have always proudly defended Sansa as one of my favorite characters. What do you think about Sansa, Cam?
Okay. Well, I like book Sansa. That's a different thing.
Okay.
And some of this is conjecture because the show passed the books and we get into apocrypha, things that may not be confirmed canon. I just didn't like when she told Jon to stop beating Ramsay Bolton to death at the end of Battle of the Bastards.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes sense for her character arc. I think we were all with Jon in that moment.
Sure. Okay, let me clarify.
I've never been able to move past that
Sansa
moment.
is one of my favorite characters through season 5. I love the journey that she goes on. I guess through the course of the books, I suppose, is sort of where we agree. Sansa gets a lot of hate for a very good reason. She's an idiot. She's dumb. She's incredibly naive. And she sometimes makes the wrong decisions. Sometimes she's not a very nice person. I think Sansa is incredibly strong and interesting and grows so much over the course of this story in ways that a lot of other people don't. And so I was really excited to get to read this first chapter of her where you really hate her in this chapter.
Oh, I don't hate her. I love the way she's written here. I think she's so fun and genuine and young. And obviously the arc of her character is brutalizing the naivete of
yes.
The way she looks at people and talks about people in this chapter is so funny.
Yeah, she is incredibly human here.
She's trying to do the Regina George thing, which is very funny.
She's trying to do it and is doing a terrible job. And it's very interesting to watch.
I found it very endearing.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you are with me on this. For now. So if you haven't been here before, Cam and I have, as you can tell, have seen the whole show. Cam's read all the books. I've read half the books. So we're spoiling everything. What we're doing is a deep dive, chapter by chapter breakdown of this series. And so it's been really fun so far. I'm going to give a quick recap of the chapter, and then we're going to dive into our discussion. So this is A Game of Thrones, Sansa, number 1. We are on the road to King's Landing still. It feels like we've been in forever, but to be fair, we're reading 8 pages at a time every week.
We were stuck in Winterfell forever.
That's true.
We just got out of Winterfell. You're already bored.
That's true. I'm not bored. It's just I was starting this chapter and I was like, oh, they're not even at King's Landing yet. I think I had forgotten about this little interlude and I was assuming we were already going to be there. So that's why.
I liked all the descriptions of the outdoors because I don't leave the house much, but I like reading about
leaving
flowers
the house
and fjords and all these wonderful things.
Imagine that. Yes. So they're on the road. Sansa is looking forward to the day because she's going to be riding in Princess Marcella's stagecoach. It's a very big deal, but she's very nervous that Arya is going to ruin it because Arya, of course, doesn't care about Princess Marcella. Arya is always doing things that are not ladylike and are just embarrassing for Sansa.
She's willful.
Right. And so Sansa is very nervous about that. She has breakfast. She gets up. And she finds Arya outside. And Arya tells Sansa that she and her friend Micah, who is the butcher's son, have been going around and exploring the countryside. And they're going to go look for rubies. The rubies are Rhaegar's rubies. This is where King Robert had killed Prince Rhaegar. And so there's legends that his rubies are around. And Sansa's no, you can't go do that. We have to go be in Princess Marcella's stagecoach today. She invited you. You have to come. And Arya's I don't care about that. I'm not going to do that. What are you talking about? And so, yeah, right. So they're arguing, and Sansa doesn't want Arya to ruin it, to embarrass her, and they're just arguing. And then Arya basically kind of has a better last word and storms off, and Sansa's furious and is running around crying. She kind of takes a walk and she arrives back at the inn where they've been staying, and she learns that the King's Council has sent an honor guard to escort them the rest of the way down to King's Landing. And so in this council we meet 3 new characters.
Oops.
One of them is Sir Barristan Selmy, who is this older legendary knight of the King's Guard, very impressive guy.
Rip.
Yes, rip. Rip all these guys.
Yes,
actually.
I was. Yeah.
Oof, yeah. We also meet Renly Baratheon, rip. Robert's younger brother, and also Lord of Storm's End. And we meet Sir Ilyn Payne, who is an absolutely terrifying man whose tongue had been cut out by King Ares and just gives Sansa the major creeps, and she does not like him.
He's got hair like Riff Raff from Rocky Horror.
Yeah, it's like just little strands by his ears that are long like a lady's.
The only hair he has left is just the little tufts above his ears.
Yeah,
but
nasty.
George R. R. Martin says that he grew them out to the length of a woman's hair.
Yeah, nasty. Don't do that. Fellas, if you're losing your hair, just shave it off. Don't
it's
do
like
that.
Curtain bangs for your ears.
Yeah. It's like, it feels like if Snape had started losing his hair. Like, that's what would have happened. Anyway, very gross. And so we meet all these guys, and Cersei says to Sansa that she and the council need to like meet and talk, so they're going to have to postpone the ride with Marcella. But she says, Joffrey, why don't you go spend the day with Sansa instead? Sansa is, of course, elated. She's like, a whole day with my prince? This whole time, I should say, there's like a running monologue inside Sansa's head where she just has such fanciful, naive ideas about what's happening. She calls Joffrey her betrothed. He's a beautiful, perfect prince with golden hair. She wants everything to be nice and like the songs. Like, that's what's going through her 13-year-old brain right now.
She just wants to be lounging in like a Jane Austen manor house.
Yeah.
And boy, is she not.
Yeah. But no, she's not 13. I think she's 11. In the show, she's 13. I think in the book, she's 11. She's an adolescent girl.
These numbers don't feel real.
No, they really don't.
When I read them,
do you remember being 11? Like, oh my God.
No.
Anyway, yeah, she's not 13. She's not close to John and Rob's age. So no, she's like 11. Okay. So Sansa's like, Joffrey's like, what do you want to do? And she says, whatever you want to do, my prince. And he's like, let's go riding. And she goes, I love riding. We learned a page ago she hates riding. Right. But she's like, I'll go riding with you. That's fine. And so they go riding for the day. They end up like basically
adventuring. They're
adventuring. They basically like force somebody to make lunch for them, and they drink like way too much wine. Remember, they're children. And then they're like, Sansa's like, we should probably be getting back. And then they hear a noise, and it's in the woods, and they see that it's Arya and Micah playing at nights with wooden sticks. Sansa is, of course, outraged and embarrassed. She's like, Arya, what are you doing? Like, this is incredibly, like, not what you're supposed to be doing as, like, the daughter of the Hand of the King. And Joffrey is all, like, being his psycho self. And he attacks Micah. He says, like, that's my lady's sister you're hitting. You're just a butcher's boy. And he, like, pulls out his, like, actual greatsword. Not his, like, wooden sword, like, his actual sword. Now, it is a mini greatsword. Like, it's the size that's appropriate to his 12-year-old body size, but it's still, like, a real ass sword.
The blade is real.
Yeah. And he's, like, about to basically attack Micah, like hurt him.
And he is. He has the blade pressed into the kid's cheek.
His face. Yeah. Arya hits Joffrey from behind with a stick. And it basically it makes an impact. Joffrey's like bleeding. Micah runs off, and then Joffrey turns around to attack Arya. He starts calling her all kinds of words that we don't even get to hear. They're so nasty. And then he's about to like truly hurt Arya, and Nymeria pops out, Arya's wolf, and bites the hell out of Joffrey's arm. Arya calls her off, and then she and the wolf run away. Joffrey's like writhing on the ground, Malfoy style. Oh,
exactly.
It's killing me.
I was just going to reference that.
And Sansa's like, this whole time she's like had no idea what to do. She's just been like yelling, "Stop it!" to both of them. She says, "You're spoiling it." Like, it's so sad. What?
Well, with the next chapter, we know how the next chapter ends.
Yeah.
That's when Ned has to put down one of the wolves.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Buckbeak is sentenced to death.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Joanne, get it together. Sansa is devastated. She tries to comfort Joffrey, and he just like looks at her with this like loathing and contempt. He's like, "Don't touch me, leave." And that's how it ends.
Yeah, we finally get to meet real Joffrey in the final moments of this chapter.
Well, Sansa finally gets to meet him. We've kind of already met him. He's been pretty nasty already.
This feels like the first chapter we've gotten to spend in the company of just the younger characters.
Yes, exactly. Because even with... Well, no, I mean, we kind of got that with Jon and Arya, and that one where they're watching them play or practice the sword fighting.
It's different because Ned and Catelyn were there, and they were safe and at home and had all these authority figures around.
True, yeah.
This is like Lord of the Flies with these four.
Yeah, because that's true. They're totally off on their own, like trying to play politics, basically. Like that's generally what's happening. Like, Arya and Micah are playing at knights. Joffrey is like playing at being a king. Both he and Sansa, both throughout this chapter, are sort of playing at being adults. Sansa says to Arya, "Oh, you're such a child." She's 11. And then, like, Joffrey goes up to Micah, who is older than him. Micah's like 13, 14. Joffrey's only 12. And, like, Joffrey says, like, "What are you doing? Like, what do you think you're doing?" Like, and he, like, tries to have this commanding air over him, but they're both kids. Like, Joffrey and Sansa are really, like, playing at being adults here. And so is Arya. Like, none of them know how to be kids because they're at that weird age where you want to be older and grown up, but you don't know how to be yet. Your brain's still cooking. So it's really messy and tough for them.
And it only works if everyone's playing the same game, right? You all have to be playing House or Kings or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And Arya is not.
No.
And I love that the second someone breaks the rules of this uncertain game that Joffrey's trying to play, he just goes feral in the end of the chapter.
Yeah, right. He totally, like, one-ups everybody, but, like, in the worst, nastiest way.
The mirage kind of falls apart. And I think that's sort of the arc of the chapter.
Yeah.
I basically have one big thing. Okay. I think you do too.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Actually, I'll start with my small thing, actually. Just because I liked the way, I mean, as we know, George R. R. Martin is fantastic at these character introductions. I've learned so much about Sansa in, 12 pages of text here. And we learn that she is, like, idealistic and naive, but she's also incredibly, like, insecure and selfish and dishonest, which are qualities that a lady is really not supposed to have. Like, we see her being selfish around, like, how she, talks to Arya and refuses to see things from her point of view and wants everything to be nice for her. Not just like she wants everybody to get along. She wants things to be nice for her sake. And she wants to spend time with Joffrey and make him fall in love with her and all these things. She's really insecure. There are a lot of moments where Joffrey, like when, I forget what's happening. Oh, Joffrey makes a joke about, I had to leave my dog behind. And he means the hound, Sir Sandor Clegane. And Sansa's like, you don't have a dog. Like, what do you mean? And he explains it. And then she's like, oh. And the narration says, like, she wanted to hit herself for being so stupid. Like, there's a lot of moments like that where she's really, like, not secure in herself and is really trying to just, perform, exactly. And of course, she's very dishonest. We see her lying a lot in this chapter. At the beginning, we see that she's feeding Lady some bacon under the table, her wolf Lady, like trying to do it under the table, like sneakily. She ends up being caught by Septim Ordain, but still she's trying to do this thing she's not supposed to be doing. Septim Ordain asks, like, why isn't Arya at breakfast? And Sansa says that it's because she wasn't hungry, but she knows full well that Arya probably, like, got up early and went down to the kitchens and, like, got some food from one of the, cook boys or whatever. We also see her, of course, lying to Joffrey about the fact that she loves to ride, even though we know, of course, that she doesn't. So she's incredibly, like, dishonest. And for me, that reminded me of what we talked about last week with Catelyn, about how Catelyn is sort of moving away from that honorable Stark thing and has sort of embraced the scheming Lannister thing. Catelyn's not lying, but she's, like, willing to see the worst in people and is willing to sort of sneak around and, like, go to King's Landing and try to find out the truth and, like, do this more schemy vulture-y thing that's something that, like, Ned wouldn't necessarily do. And I think here this dishonesty that Sansa is displaying is her way of trying to survive in that almost Lannisterian way of lying and tricking people and, like, manipulating people. We saw how manipulative Sansa was in Arya's first chapter, and so I think that's sort of this thing that she and Catelyn kind of have in common, is that they're trying to survive. They're not always doing the best job, but I think they're demonstrating a desire to survive in a way that Ned will not.
It's reminding me a little bit of our Rosemary's Baby episode from a few months ago.
Okay.
Because so much of that conversation was about the delicacy, the fragility of the social contract, and how if everyone else is breaking it, there's more and more temptation for even the good people to start bending their principles and lying and cheating and stealing, and how that falls to ruin. And then you get Thomas Hobbes and State of Nature and Leviathan, all that.
Right.
I think some of that's happening here, where you see Sansa compromising her ideals. She wants this Jane Austen thing that's never going to happen, but she has to sort of play the game to get her way.
Yeah.
So it's already corrupted.
Yes.
One chapter in, and we know the rest of her arc is going to be her having to continue to compromise and hide and mislead.
Yeah. And you can see her being frustrated with Ned in the way that he won't play the game, because at one point in the narration we learn that Arya like has been running around getting dirty, like picking wildflowers for Ned. It's so sweet. And she like brings them to her dad, and Sansa like wishes that her dad would like say, you have to stop doing this kind of thing. You have to act like a lady is supposed to look, you know, and do all these things. But he doesn't. Instead, he just tells her thank you for the flowers, which is like such a, obviously the right thing to do. He's a good father. He's a good person. He lets his daughter be the person she wants to be, at least for now. But, you know, Sansa's frustrated that Ned won't insist that Arya play the game. And
it's
that
not
Arya
the
do
savvy thing to do when you're on the road to King's Landing.
It's certainly
I noticed
not.
that too. That was my little thing. I noticed a similarity between the setup of this chapter and the setup of the last Ned chapter. And I like your point that it's making Sansa look much better at the game than Ned is.
Yeah.
Because both of these chapters once they take a little time getting there, the arc of these chapters is a tongue-tied Stark taking a doomed horse ride with a Baratheon.
Yeah, it's true.
And for Ned, it's like challenging his non-intervention tendencies as a gargoyle character. And I think for Sansa, it is a teaching moment.
I think you're right.
But like where Ned's discussion has this future threat implicit in their discussion of Dany, Sansa's has the introduction of the guy who's going to behead her father.
Yeah. Very true.
So like they are walking very similar paths here, but I like your point that Sansa seems to be learning more from these experiences.
Yes, even though she still doesn't come out of this chapter very smart. Like she is, we already see that she's learning. And I think that's another, like, I noticed another like big distinction between her and Ned in this chapter as it relates to the sort of seen and unseen stuff we talked about. I think I'll get into that right now. So we've talked at length about this, you know, ability to see and remain unseen gives you power. Not being able to see, being seen by others diminishes your power. We know, of course, Ned is probably the blindest of all the Starks. He refuses to see the truth of things. He and is not very good at hiding. He's good at keeping silent, but he's not very good at like hiding things. He's not very savvy in that way because he's so honest and honorable and is a good person. And we see people like Jon who are incredibly observant and really good at hiding in the shadows, and that's sort of what gives them their power and their ability to succeed as well as they can in this world. We haven't really gotten to do that with Sansa yet, so that's why I wanted to do it here. And it really crops up here. We, of course, notice, like, I think, like, the biggest, most obvious character trait of Sansa right when you meet her is that she is naive, right? And naivete, what is that but blindness, right? She is blind to Joffrey's like open dislike of her and just his cruelty. She's incredibly blind to how much of a shitty person he is. Yeah. She's also sort of like in like smaller ways. She's, well, I guess actually in a larger way, she's just blind to the realities of the world and that things are not like they are in the songs and poems and legends and stories. And she even tries to like morph her reality around them to make it fit. Like at one point when she's like gone into the inn to like meet all those knights and stuff, like she has this moment where she's kind of embarrassed and like sort of humiliated by the way that like Sir Ilyn is staring at her and stuff. And Joffrey kind of comes in and says, you know, you're being rude to my lady or something. He does like the bare minimum. He's just like, be nice to her. And she says in her mind, like, it was just like in the songs when the guy saved this princess from a dragon. And I'm like, girl, it's nothing like that, but okay. So she's blind in that way, but she's also blind in these more like micro ways. Like when she's talking to Arya, like Arya and Sansa have been talking about the countryside, and Arya's like complaining, I don't want to go in the wheelhouse. It doesn't have any windows. You can't see anything. And Sansa says like, what would you want to see? There's nothing to see out here. The landscape is disgusting. It's dirty. It smells. There's weird fungi. There's poisonous flowers. Like, ew, nature, gross. But then, of course, she notices the beauty of it when she's with Joffrey. She's like, oh, the countryside is so gorgeous. And so she's blind to it when she's talking about it with Arya.
But there's a comfort in that ignorance,
yes,
in that inability to see out of the wheelhouse. That means there aren't problems on the horizon. You don't know what's out there.
Right, of course. And then like with lots of moments where tears are filling her eyes. She's blinded by tears. Like she has a lot of those moments. And so, of course, we say, okay, Sansa can't see. She's blind. She's naive, ignorant, duh. But we also get a lot of moments in here, too, where we do notice that she can see actually quite a lot. The sight of Sir Ilan Payne alone like fills her with dread and fear in a way that she's never felt afraid before. We also see her gazing up at Joffrey worshipfully. We also see her use her observation skills to identify Renly and Sir Barristan in front of everybody. Like, she is able to notice he's got, Baratheon antlers on his helmet. Oh, Sir Barristan looks like this. Like, she is able to identify these people through her powers of observation. So not only does she identify them, she also does it to impress the people around her. So she's very savvy in that way. There's also this line where it says, Sansa had only to glance at Arya and see the flush on her sister's face to know the boy was telling the truth. So she's able to glean a lot of information from one glance at her sister. So Sansa is in fact incredibly observant, but she sort of lets things get in the way and she sort of chooses to focus on different things. And she, refuses to see the truth of who Joffrey is and refuses to see how cruel the world is. And so she's going to have to sort of learn to lean on those powers of observation that she does have. In the way that Jon is able to observe things really well and use that to his advantage and manipulate as best as he can, in the position that he's in to get what he wants or to survive or, to avoid danger. And Sansa's going to have to learn how to do that too. So it's cool that we're sort of giving, the seeds are being planted here. Like, Sansa is observant. She can do this, but she's going to have to learn to do it more effectively. Again, in direct contrast to Ned, who I think is really not going to do this kind of thing.
I enjoyed the comparisons to Jon. I didn't see any of those, but they are of a similar age, and they're being thrust into these extremely regimented new worlds.
Yeah.
Because she kind of joins the aristocracy, more or less, when she lands in King's Landing.
Yeah, and she's gonna marry Joffrey. She's gonna be the queen. Right. She's preparing for that.
And abstracting that, just looking at this phase of her life where she's gonna be almost in the royal court, that has an interesting hyper structure compared to the almost militaristic Night's Watch that Jon is joining.
Yeah.
So I wanna follow that track as we keep going with these characters and see how they both quietly learn the life lessons that seem to escape some of our more noble gargoyles.
Right. And I also think it's kind of fun to have these, comparisons and connections between Sansa and Jon, because we know that later on they will be reunited, and they're the first two Stark children to be reunited, apart from anybody else. You, of course, reading this first book, you expect it to be Jon and Arya who reconnect and join up together and use their combined powers of, militaristic leadership and then assassination skills to rule everything. But instead it's Sansa and Jon who come together, because actually they end up leading, at least from what I can tell, seems like it's going to be pretty parallel lives, obviously in very different ways, but and even they're joined, hatred and hatred of Ramsay, right? That's what you talked about earlier. So I'm interested in that connection. It's fun.
I hope that's better in the books.
I do too.
The thing I want to play with is a little different. I was so interested in the gulf between Sansa and Arya in this chapter, but I think I hit it a little differently, which is good because, we bring different things to the table.
Love that.
The thing that charmed me about Sansa was how classist she was.
Oh, she's incredibly classist.
But almost aspirationally classist, because she wants to be one of those hoity-toity, out of touch.
Right. She wants to be even higher ranking than she already is.
Cruel and crass and completely detached from reality and society.
Right.
That's sort of funny when a kid is trying to do that, because that's implicit within that Jane Austen thing, is she wants to be of the aristocracy, sneering down at the butler.
Right.
Never mind the untouchables walking the streets.
Yeah, she says
it's
John's
funny.
Mother was common.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's in italics. It's very funny.
And that is so funny in contrast to Arya, who's aggressively rubbing mud on her arms. And,
and
she has a rash, so she dives in like a pig. It's very
and she
funny.
Only wants to hang out with people who are working class.
That one, I did laugh at the one line where she's making fun of Arya. I mean, she's aghast. It's not funny intentionally, but she's saying she compares Arya to an ignorant bog woman. It's very funny. It's very endearing. And she's going to go through hell and learn and evolve. So it's not like she is one of those characters that she's pretending to be.
Right.
But I enjoyed this sort of clumsy divide between the wild sister and the civilized one.
Right.
And that got me thinking about this term that I used in one of our Dune discussions, and applying it here I think is interesting, because the difference between Arya and Sansa in that clumsy classist sort of framework that Sansa's projecting here is that Sansa doesn't think Arya is domesticated. And I mean that literally because of the gender implications of everything she's pretending to be. She wants to be the lady on the chaise longue eating the lemon cakes, and Arya is out there in the mud. But that theme of domestication got me thinking about animals in a way that you usually do.
Oh, okay.
So this isn't about birds.
I was going to say, we haven't done an animal deep dive in a while.
And this isn't a deep dive.
Only a matter of time.
I think it's almost in the same way we talk about vultures and gargoyles. I want to continue with some of those sort of animal classifications.
Cool.
Because I couldn't help but notice through this entire chapter the ever-presence of wolves and dogs.
Yes, they are heavily... I really didn't mention them much in the recap, but the wolves are in every scene.
Yeah, because Arya has her dog, who she's trying to give a bath for most of the chapter, and Sansa has Lady, almost like a sidekick, with her through every scene, except the last one, and then, of course, one of the wolves bounds in.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, you have this constant metaphor of dogs, and then you have the Hound, who shows up and talks to Sansa a little bit. So if you want to like quickly graft that onto Sansa and Arya, given their initial characterizations, you have Arya as this like wild dog.
Yes.
And you have Sansa as this wolf in the way that the dire wolf is sort of the noble
this
sigil
noble,
of
well-trained, like almost like not animal-like, like it's more human-like. It's
right.
It's like more sentient, I guess, than a human.
Sure, it's also just more special.
Yeah.
So you can do a highborn, lowborn kind of thing there of the wolves being more refined and important and powerful, and the dogs being more mangy. It's interesting how I think we're continuing to develop Arya, even though it's not her POV chapter, as this kind of like Lady and the Tramp sort of divide between her and Sansa.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what the lesson might be of that dichotomy, because I think at this young age, at the very beginning of their character arcs, the lesson could be as simple as it's hard to tell who's who. Who's the wolf, who's the dog, and more importantly, which one of those two groups is a threat to you. So this could just be a learning moment for these two girls, but I'm almost more interested in the mutual contradiction of the way the dog-wolf thing is developed here. Because the Hound is a dog.
Yes.
And he's more mangy. He's more lowborn.
Yeah.
Even in the sort of accented way his dialogue is written, he's got kind of the Hagrid style, making him the like, Cockney coded for lower-born sort of thing.
Yeah.
He is more dangerous and wolfish than any of the prim and proper knights or Kingsguard that we see in this chapter.
True, yeah.
So you're immediately complicating these associations. So he's called a Hound, so he's in the dog camp, but he's more like genuinely wolfish and scary than any of the other guys.
Yeah.
But then he's kind of kind to Sansa.
Right, in his own way. Yeah.
And is that like a loyal dog, or is that like the mangy, scary dog?
Yeah, It's messy.
And I think that's the point, is to introduce this framework and then just mess it up for the rest of the chapter to tell us there are no like simple understandings here.
Yes.
Similarly, the dire wolves are regal and stately. We talked about in the last couple of weeks how they are this mythical house sigil it's like a dragon being brought back to life, the way the reemergence of dire wolves is appreciated in this world. So they're safe, and they're dogs to children, and they're loyal to these young kids, and they can pet them and wash them by the river. But then last chapter we saw one rip a guy's throat out.
Yes, right. When it came to like defending their person, that all of a sudden they become incredibly violent and scary.
So any character or animal that is classified within that easy dog-wolf dichotomy, it's immediately contradictory in both sides. And this is the messing up of any simple classifications in this world. And when you attempt to then graft Arya and Sansa into the wolf-dog dichotomy, you're not sure where you land anymore. So then the question becomes not who's who, but is the dog-wolf thing, is that a permanent state? is that something you're born into? Is that something you become? And can you jump the fence to the other side? When is that established? And I think that's a beautiful way to transition into the introduction of characters like the Hound, who have been so shaped by their environment, who we know will undergo such a massive change in evolution, and even someone like Joffrey, who was born with the silver spoon, who is this like regal and put together highborn, he passes Sansa's initial test, but then she learns by the end of the chapter that he's much worse and much more feral than most of these other characters. The point is the confusion. And I love that initial thing of Sansa mistrusting all the low-born dogs. But all of the high-born people are the threats to her. Right. Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne. These are all murderers who are going to winnow down her family.
Right. So she kind of learns that, actually there is no distinction and it's not that clean and it's much messier than I thought.
So returning to that question of like, what is the lesson here? Maybe I think it could just be to question people's appearance and not trust how someone presents themselves to you. Because as we move towards King's Landing, and that's where Arya and Sansa are really going to learn some hard truths, it would make sense to adopt a general caution or mistrust of everyone they're going to meet. But the other lesson that's implicit in this, as it is Sansa's chapter and Arya is being so furthered in her characterization, is that Arya can tell the difference immediately.
Yes, that's very
Arya
true.
doesn't have any trouble telling the difference between the dog and the wolf thing.
That's a really good point. She knows exactly immediately that Joffrey is a piece of shit and she's not going to give him anything.
She swings on the prince without a thought.
Versus she knows that Micah, this butcher's boy, is an amazing friend, is fun to hang out with, knows, what to look for when they're traveling the countryside, and is a lot of fun to be with. Yeah.
And I think as much as George R. R. Martin is within Sansa's POV, as he dedicates himself to everyone's POV when it's their chapter, I think there's a bit of a narrative bias towards the clarity of Arya.
Yes.
In this chapter, because Joffrey's introduced as this highborn wolf, kind of direwolfy sigil character who is so respectable and regal. But when he's fighting Arya at the end, George R. R. Martin describes his movements as him hounding her.
Oh, nice.
And I think that is sort of the official, we've introduced the dog wolf thing, now we're exploding this dichotomy and we can move forward. That beeping is on our end, not yours, don't worry.
Don't worry about it. It'll go away in a minute.
But like so many other characters in this world, Joffrey is now going to exist within both camps simultaneously. And I think that was the real work of this chapter, is it's about the gray of this world. Nothing is black and white. And I think these 12 pages are sort of watching George R. R. Martin mix paint, where he's just he's dropping like a little bit of black paint, a little bit of white paint. And by the end of the 12 pages, it's all this dangerous, obscured, unknown gray.
That's lovely.
And that makes whatever the next step is, because we know what the next chapter is about, but the next step in Sansa's journey, in Arya's journey, is so much scarier and unknowable now. Yeah. I think this was as much an introduction as it was one of those revving up hype chapters for the future of this story.
I really like the way you've laid that out, and I love how that contrast with Arya. I think you're so right about that. Arya immediately knows, and I feel like that's pretty consistent with her character throughout her journey, and it's not just with people. Like she's just so sure of herself and knows immediately what she wants and how she wants to react to something. Like talking about going to Marcella's stagecoach. Arya's immediately like, I don't want to do that. And and she says like, Princess Marcella is a sissy, or she's stupid, or she says she
I don't like the queen.
Yeah, she identifies that like Marcella is a moron, and that like going into this stagecoach will benefit her in no way that she can identify, and knows that these people suck and doesn't want to spend time with them. She'd much rather hang out with the cool butcher's boy. Like not caring about, or at least ignoring or looking past
class,
those dog wolf class distinctions. Exactly. So like she immediately knows, in the same way that she knows that Jon is a much better person than Sansa, even though Sansa is like a true born eldest daughter of this lord, whereas Jon is a bastard. She knows Jon's a better person, so she likes Jon better. Like she's just much quicker and smarter at that, and is unafraid. Like it doesn't lie the way that Sansa lies. Sansa lies like as a survival technique to blend in, to act the way people expect and want her to act, so that she can skate on by. Arya is open about, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to wear this dress. I'm going to wear my nasty boiled leather that I've been wearing 3 days in a row because it's good for hunting outside. Like, she is not going to be subservient and dishonest the way that Sansa is. And so she's going to make her own way of surviving in this different way than Sansa. But I like that distinction that it's really, really apparent here.
It's sort of a tortoise and the hare thing where Arya has the early lead because she's blunt and overly honest. But her arc is learning when to shut up, when to observe in this like weaponized silence that Ned and Jon are better at.
Of course, yeah. Like she has to learn that.
She becomes like a quiet assassin.
If she stays the way she is now, then she will not survive this world. So yeah.
Also, to complement your earlier point, she eventually is blinded as part of her training.
Yes, like she kind of has to learn how to be blind a little bit. She has to tone it back just a little.
Meanwhile, Sansa's kind of slow and steady in the way she learns when to be bold and when to assert herself.
Yes.
And in the end, I think Sansa comes out on top.
Yeah.
Between their character arcs. So I'm enjoying how we're kind of starting that race. We have the starter pistol in this chapter, and now we get to see them on their incredibly divergent character arcs.
Absolutely, yeah. Really, really interesting to see. This was a chapter was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we're going to get back to Ned in the next chapter.
Yeah, and I know what happens next.
Oh yeah,
I said last week I don't know what happens anymore. I know what happens now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And usually, I feel like lately we've been bouncing around a lot because our characters have all split off. So it's nice to know that the next chapter is going to be an immediate continuation of this storyline. Like we're not going to bounce off and see Ned on a hunt with Robert. We're going to see him deal with this. No, but I thought we were going to make it through a whole episode without doing it. I even almost did it earlier. I don't know if you noticed, and then I decided not to because I'm a grown-up. Anyway.
You know who else is a grown-up?
Who?
Robert.
Stop it. Anyway, so we're going to see an immediate continuation of this storyline in the next chapter.
Sansa wants a Downton Abbey life.
It's true.
It would have been germane to the conversation.
You know, we can retroactively make it germane to the conversation.
If you like talking about books, this past Sunday we dropped a bonus episode on Patreon that is all about books. It is about book formats. It's us talking about, hey, you want to go read a book? What are your options in 2024? There's mass market paperback, there's trade paperback, there's hardcover, there's ebook, there's audiobook. We talk about the pricing structures of those. What's comfortable, what's accessible, what's immersive, what's relaxing. We talk about all of the pros and cons of those various formats. It's a really fun, loose, podcasty sort of discussion.
Yeah, it's not really just fun. We're not breaking down a work of art. We're more just like talking about the act of reading, and it was very, very fun.
Really fun. So go check that out. That's only one of 2 bonus episodes we're doing this month because, as you know, we're devoting the month to Dune for our Devouring Dune series. We've done 3 episodes breaking down the first novel. We've already recorded the next 2 novels. Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. Those will be coming out soon.
We also did Dune Part 2, the movie.
Yes, we did a 90-minute spectacular going through the new movie. And the other bonus episode for this month is us talking about the David Lynch Dune from 1984.
Yes.
That'll be coming out this next Tuesday.
Yes.
So if you want access to all those bonus episodes, as well as all the other bonus episodes we've piled up over the last, I think, 2 years over on Patreon, $2 a month, support the show, get a bunch of other stuff to listen to. We do different sorts of episodes there. Sometimes we do the breakfast buffet roundup of 6 or 7, 4 or 5 different works of art, or we get to do these kind of dedicated, riskier, podcasty sort of discussions. So we've been having a lot of fun over there. Thank you for listening and supporting the show, and we'll be back on Tuesday.
Yeah, see y'all then. Bye.